So now we're going to talk about the time value of money. And we're just going to focus on the basic concepts because of all of the 3 lectures regarding this is probably the most important. Getting the fundamentals down now is going to become very, very important to our future talks and our future presentations.
Hey guys, I am Deric. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about the basic concept of time value of money. As we know, time has value. Like Proverbs says, time is money. Let's think about it. Which one would you prefer to receive? $10,000 today or $10,000 in 5 years' time? I believe that your answer is definitely today. But the question is, why? We want to receive the money now, but not after 5 years. That's because $1 today is worth more than $1 in the future. As a basic principle of time value, money available at the present time is worth more than the same amount in the future due to its potential earning capacity. So, after receiving $10,000 today, we may use this portion of money to invest and earn return from it. Another point, the concept of time value of money is important because it allows the comparison of cash flows from different periods.
I'm going to pause it just for a second because this is actually a very, very important statement that doesn't get talked on early in this lecture, but it gets talked about towards the end of it. So I'm going to state it now and I'm going to state it later. The time value of money allows you to compare the cash flows from different time periods. And I'll come back to this and I'll pause the video when it's time to unpack this statement.
We will explain about it later in this video. All right, another question for you. Let's say your father has offered to give you some money and asks you to choose one of the following 2 alternatives. $1,000 today or $1,100 1 year from now. Which one would be your choice? Before making your decision, it is important to know that the answer depends on what rate of interest you could earn on any money you receive today. From $1,000 to $1,100, there is an increase of $100 or 10% interest rate. So, if you could deposit $1,000 today at 12% per year, you would prefer to be paid today because you could earn more interest on your own. What if you could only earn 5% on fixed deposit? You would be better off if you chose the $1,100 in 1 year. Simply speaking, your decision depends much on what rate of interest you could earn after receiving the money. What is future value, FV? FV translates $1 today into its equivalent in the future. This process is called compounding. What?
So if we recall back, I want to say 2 series ago, we talked in the youth course about compound versus simple interest. For most of corporate finances, almost everything is talked about in terms of compound interest. So when they talk about compounding, that's what they're talking about.
What about present value, PV? PV translates $1 in the future into its equivalent today. This process is called discounting.
So in other words, you're going to receive that $1 in the future, but the question is, how much money did you have to put forth today in order to get that $1 in the future?
HP 12C.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, that was the. I'm sure they have more advanced ones now. It was kind of had to be backwards. Yeah, that's the one with the gold, golden brown. Yep, I still have it somewhere. I don't know where it is.
For the calculation of time value of money questions, there are 4 computational aids. First, use the equations. Second, use the financial tables. Third, use financial calculators. Fourth, use electronic spreadsheets such as Microsoft Excel.
We actually will be discussing financial calculators next session and how to use them in order to calculate future value and present value. It's very, very simple once you know what the variables are. It's just basically just plug and chug.
Before that, make sure you know how to draw a timeline. CF is the cash flow. T means time, usually in years or in months. I is the interest rate. The timeline is one of the most important tools for solving complicated problems. For applying this, there are some assumptions. First, unless otherwise stated, t equals 0 represents today. This is the decision point. Second, unless otherwise stated, cash flows occur at the end of a time interval. Third, cash inflows are treated as positive amounts, while cash outflows are treated as negative amounts. Fourth, compounding frequency is the same as the cash flow frequency. Compounding frequency could be annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly, or daily.
Okay, before we do that, I want you to be able to, I'm going to repeat that, but I'm going to have the timeline up so you have a visual aid as well. So let me repeat all the statements that he stated. Unless otherwise stated, t equals 0 represents today, the point where we made the decision for the investment of the money. Unless otherwise stated, cash flow occurs at the end of each time interval. So t equals 1, t equals 2, and so on. Cash inflows are always treated as positive amounts, whereas outflows are treated as negative amounts. Oftentimes, CF sub 0 is going to be a negative amount because that's the money you sunk in to get money later on when you get to CF sub 4. The other ones are typically going to be positive. Compounding frequency is the same as cash flow frequency, meaning we compound with every time interval, and those tend to sync up with each other. So CF1 will always be at t equals 1. CF2 will always be at t equals 2, and that's when the interest is paid out. Okay, let's go back then to here.
Be annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly, or daily. The cash inflows and outflows of a firm can be described by its general pattern. The three basic patterns include a single amount, an annuity, or a mixed stream. As shown in the table, Project A is a single amount cash flow, in which only one cash inflow on year 1. Project B is an annuity, because there are repeating cash inflows from year 1 to year 3. Project C is a mixed stream, as from year 1 to year 6. The cash inflows are all different. These are the three basic patterns of cash flow that you will find in the questions of time value of money. Let's look at this question. Suppose a firm has an opportunity to spend $15,000 today on some investments that will produce $17,000 spread out over the next 5 years as follows, as shown in the table. What do you think? Is this a wise investment? Pay $15,000, earn back $17,000. In fact, we are not sure. The returns of $17,000 are not a one-off payment, but they are spread out over the next 5 years. To make the right investment decision, we need to compare the cash flows at a single point in time. Either we convert all the cash flows to year 5 to get the future value, or we convert all the cash flows back to year 0 to get the present value. We can only compare the cash flows at a single point in time, which means on year 0 for PV, or on year 5 for FV. Cash flows from different years are not comparable, as they have different time value. Next.
Okay, before we get into that, remember how I said, remember this sentence, time value of money allows comparison of cash flows from different periods. This slide encompasses that idea. So the idea here is that each time period has to be converted either into future value or present value so you can compare the amount of money you received and figure out what is it actually worth compared to what you put in. So let's take this for an example here in terms of and by the way, this here is a timeline. So what you can see here is you can see CF sub 0 is negative 15,000. T equals 0 is 0. So you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the T's. And then you can see CF sub 1 is 3,000, CF sub 2 is 5,000, CF sub 3 is 4,000, and so on. The only thing they really haven't given us is what the interest rate is. Take, for example, we want to know what the 3,000 is. So $3,000 at year 1. But is it...
Which means
Is it really $3,000 at present value or $3,000 at future value? I would submit to you that it's not. Let's pretend, for example, that the interest rate, which they haven't really given it to us, I'm just kind of pulling it out of a hat, is 10% compounding rate. I just made that up. If you wanted to calculate the present value of this money, it would essentially be $2,727.27 because 10% of $2,727.27 is $272.73 if you round up. And if you add that to the 2727.27, you get $3,000. So the present value of this amount that you're getting is really $2,727.27, not $3,000. Now, if you want to look at future values, you're actually going to have to compound it through year 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so you're getting a 10% each year. So at the end of year 2, you're at $3,300 for what the $3,000 is worth. At year 3, it's going to be $3,630 because you added 10% more to it. At year 4, it's going to be at $3,993. And then at year 5, finally, when you get to the future value is $4,392.30. Because you compounded 10%, then 10%, then 10%, then 10% each successive year until you got to the 5th year. So as a result of that, that $3,000, if we're taking a 10% interest rate, is either worth $2,727.27 in present value or $4,392.30 in future value. And that has to be done with every single other value that you see here, converting either to future value or present value for the $5,000, the $4,000, and the $3,000, and even the $2,000 if you decide to turn it back to present value. It sounds complicated, but it all comes back to compounding, and either you're going to be compounding up or you're going to be discounting down. And we're going to get into that more with the examples in the next series when we talk about financial calculators. But I specifically wanted to spend time on this table this chart, because this chart basically sets the tone for every single thing else that we do. And if you understand that we have to compound up each value up until you get to the future value, or discount down until we get to the present value, everything else becomes easy.
Year 0 for PV, or on year 5 for FV. Cash flows from different years are not comparable, as they have different time value. Next, there are 2 types of interest. First is simple interest. Interest paid or earned is based on the original amount, or principal borrowed or lent. As shown in the table, every year the interest is calculated based on $100, which is the original principal. So, you don't earn interest on interest. The second type is compound interest. Interest paid or earned is based on any previous interest earned, as well as on the principal borrowed or lent. As shown in the table, every year the interest is calculated based on the previous year total balance. That's why the interest payment is getting higher and higher. So, you earn interest on interest.
That's actually how I calculated that future value and then that present value on the previous example. Is I use this type of a schema with compounding interest. And do feel free to check my work.
For all the questions of time value of money, we will only apply compound interest. All right, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. See you.
And that's actually it. I want these concepts to sink in for the future sessions, because everything else becomes simple if you go over this 15 minutes a couple of times and then take a look at my example. And in fact, what I'll do is I will share my notes that I took online, so you can see my mathematical example and my mathematical proof of how I got to future value and present value. The only assumption I made, it's entirely based on that slide, and the only assumption I made was a 10% compounding rate. Now, the beautiful thing about my example is you can go back to the slide. Where's the darn thing? Here it is. You can go back to the slide and then get the future value of years 2, 3, 4, and 5, or the present value with the same compounding rate, 10%, as practice problems. And if you'd like to, what I can do is I can actually do that mathematics and have that available for us before we start the next session, if that would be helpful. Questions or comments? That's all I've got.